Welcome back to our news bulletin. In the US, over 1,200 more people have died from COVID-19, raising the total to nearly 96,000. Worldwide, the death count has crossed 338,000, while infections are over 5.2 million. More in this report.
As the number of cases and deaths from the novel coronavirus start to plateau, more countries ease their restrictions. In the US, New York State has dropped the absolute ban on gatherings of any size. Governor Andrew Cuomo has issued an executive order saying up to 10 people are now allowed to be together as long as they abide by social distancing guidelines. US President Donald Trump has also urged state governors to allow the reopening of places of worship.
Today I'm identifying houses of worship, churches, synagogue, and mosques as essential places that provide essential services. So I'm correcting this injustice and calling houses of worship essential. I call upon governors to allow our churches and places of worship to open right now.
The World Health Organization says South America has now become the epicenter of the pandemic as Brazil's death toll rose by 1,001 to over 21,000. Brazil's confirmed infections exceed 330,000, overtaking Russia to become the world's second hotspot for COVID-19. In Chile, poor residents staged protests demanding food aid to cope with the lockdown in place since late March. Peru has also extended its state of emergency and in nationwide lockdown to fight the pandemic until the end of June. Meanwhile, Britain has introduced a 14-day quarantine for all international travelers from June 8th or face a $1,218 fine for violation.
International arrivals to self-isolate for 14 days. That is the incubation period of the virus, so that if people have become infected overseas, we can limit the spread of the virus at home.
Elsewhere, China has recorded no new COVID-19 cases on the mainland for the first time since the pandemic began in the city of Wuhan last year.
Pakistan's COVID-19 death toll has crossed 1,100 after 34 died in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry reported 1,743 infection cases overnight, bringing the tally to over 52,000. The Health Ministry said 16,635 patients of coronavirus have recovered so far, while 412 remain critical. The ministry said over 460,000 tests have been conducted countrywide, with 14,705 taken since yesterday. Meanwhile, health advisor Dr. Zafar Mirza has warned the situation can worsen if people do not follow standard operating procedures. The death toll from the plane crash incident in Pakistan has reached 97, while 2 passengers have survived. Yesterday, Pakistan International Airlines plane with an estimated 99 people on board crashed in the coastal city of Karachi. The Provincial Health Ministry says 19 victims have been identified so far. The ministry said a sample collection unit for DNA tests of victims and their families has been set up in Karachi. Meanwhile, Chief Executive Officer of PIA Arshad Malik said Safety Investigation Board will hold a thorough inquiry into the tragic incident. Talking to media, he said the cause of the incident will be ascertained after taking all factors into account for the investigation. He said the crashed Airbus jet was technically fit for flying and there was no obvious reason for the accident. Now, Pakistan has once again condemned Indian attempts to change the demography of occupied Kashmir using its new domicile law. During a telephonic conversation with the OIC Secretary General, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India's move is in violation of UN Security Council resolutions and the 4th Geneva Convention. Qureshi briefed Secretary General Yusuf bin Ahmad Al Uthaymeen on the situation in the occupied valley. He said Pakistan is concerned over growing human rights violations and an increase in extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris. Foreign Minister said India might stage a false flag operation to divert world attention. Qureshi said UN, OIC and international observers must be allowed to assess the situation in occupied Kashmir. In other news, Afghan's National Security Council says the Taliban have killed 146 civilians during the holy month of Ramadan. In a tweet, the spokesperson Javed Faisal said victims included women and children from 30 districts of the country. Faisal said 430 other civilians have been wounded in the country by attacks by the fighters. Responding to the claim, Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said the accusations are completely baseless. The spokesperson said the group has not bombed any mosque, home or clinic in the country. Zabiullah said the Afghan nation is a witness that all such crimes have been perpetrated by Afghan enemy. He said the Taliban have only countered and defeated the Afghan troops. Iran says its defense industry is focused on breaking sanctions and upgrading its deterrent power as it did over the past 40 years. In a statement, the defense ministry said upgrading deterrent power is of significant importance for achieving the goals of Islam. It said the defeat of invaders in the field of soft war and arbitrary sanctions requires vigilance, awakening and understanding the different plots. The statement said, as a new chapter began in the fight for the liberation of Palestine, the ministry is ready to defend this front with all its might. It said Iran will not talk to an irrational and coercive enemy except with authority and from a position of power. The UN-backed Libyan army says Khalifa Haftar's militia is using withdrawal tactics of ISIS in the south of the capital, Tripoli. In a statement, the military said rebel forces are trapping mines in residential areas as they leave. The military said some mines are trapped to explode as the vehicle passes, while others when someone goes near it. The development comes as internationally recognized Government of National Accord said it has recaptured parts of southern Tripoli from Haftar's forces. It said the Libyan army has advanced into several districts and overran a military camp. The Libyan National Army of Haftar said it had already pulled out of those areas as a humanitarian gesture for Ramadan. 8 inmates have been killed and another 8 hospitalized with injuries after clashes broke out at a prison in Mexico's central state of Jalisco. In a press conference, security officials said 3 prisoners were killed by firearms while 5 others died from beatings in Puente Grande complex. The jail authorities said the fight broke out as inmates participated in a sports activity. Officials said jail staff never lost control of the facility and they recovered 2 firearms and a homemade explosive device. They said 5 people have been detained for having a possible role in the confrontation. The jail authorities said they will probe whether any public officials were involved. Russia says it intends to implement the provisions of Open Skies Treaty despite the unilateral withdrawal of the US from the accord. Speaking to media, the Russian mission to NATO said it is ready for further dialogue with the US in the interests of European and international security. The mission said all parties to the treaty will have to clearly define their positions. Earlier, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said the US provided no facts to back up its allegations that Russia has repeatedly violated the treaty. He said Washington's claims are totally unfounded. Meanwhile, 10 European nations expressed regret over US decision to exit the treaty, which allows unarmed surveillance flights over member countries. The US has called on the World Health Organization to start immediate work on investigating its handling of the response to the COVID-19. In a statement, Assistant Secretary for Health Admiral Brett Greer said there is no time to waste and urged the agency to also probe into the source of the virus. He said the US lauds the call for an impartial, independent and comprehensive review to be undertaken in consultation with member states. Greer referred to an EU resolution that was unanimously adopted by the WHO's annual Ministerial Assembly, calling for a thorough evaluation. He said the WHO Assembly must address the outcome of the review process, including Taiwan's ability to participate as an observer. We're now taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. Muslims around the world prepare for Eid al-Fitr as they bid farewell to the fasting month of Ramadan. The traditional celebrations will be affected this year as nations around the world take measures to curb the coronavirus pandemic. Festivals and public celebrations on Eid have been banned in many Muslim countries. Eid prayers have also been cancelled in several countries amid the pandemic, including Oman and Egypt. Saudi Arabia's Grand Mufti has urged Muslims to pray at home instead of going to the mosque. Yemen's health ministry has asked citizens to wear masks in public and not leave their homes unless absolutely necessary. Traditionally, people greet one another after Eid prayers and spend the day visiting relatives and accepting sweets as they move around from house to house. In Germany, a church in capital Berlin has opened its doors to Muslim worshippers unable to fit into their mosque under new social distancing rules. The Dar es Salaam Mosque normally welcomes hundreds of Muslims to its Friday services, but could only accommodate 50 people this time under COVID-19 restrictions. Details in this report.
Throughout the month of Ramadan, Muslims abstain from eating, drinking, and other desires from dawn to dusk. Families and friends gather to break their fast and attend communal prayers. But in Berlin, as in countries across the world, this year's celebrations have been affected. At such a time, Malta Lutheran Church stepped in to help by hosting Muslim prayers in Arabic and German.
It is a great signal and it brings joy amid Ramadan and joy amid this crisis. This pandemic has made us a community. Crises make people get together.
Places of worship reopened in Germany on May 4th after weeks of closures under the lockdown. But worshippers must maintain a minimum distance of 1.5 meters from one another. The church's pastor also took part in the service. Muslims noted the contrast of the church to the Islamic worship place but agreed that at the end it is also a house of God.
First, when you get into the church, was a strange feeling because of the music instrument and the photos. So it is something different from the mosque. But when you forget the small details, this is the house of the God, and at the end, so they are all the same.
This year, Muslims around the world are being urged to celebrate Eid al-Fitr at home as the holy month of Ramadan comes to an end.
Afghanistan says the number of COVID-19 cases in the country has crossed 9,000. In a statement, the health ministry said 12 people lost their lives over the past 24 hours, taking the tally to 205. It said 542 new cases were registered overnight in Kabul, Herat, Nangarhar, Baghlan and Balkh. So far, around 1,000 people have recovered from the virus in the country. Kabul has become a hotspot for the virus, with 316 reported cases in 24 hours. A US study has revealed the plasma from people who recovered from COVID-19 show improved survival rates. The study detailed the preliminary outcomes of 39 patients hospitalized at the Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. Patients with severe COVID-19 given plasma were more likely to stabilize or need less oxygen support than other similar patients. The study said the number of patients was small, so the results cannot be interpreted as applying to those on mechanical ventilators. Researchers analyzed outcomes for 39 patients who received plasma transfusions compared to outcomes for patients with carefully matched medical status. It said nearly 13% of plasma recipients died while 72% were discharged alive. The UN says COVID-19 pandemic has increased cybercrimes as the world moves towards increased online collaboration. In an informal meeting of UNSC disarmament chief, Izumu Nakamitsu said there has been a 600% increase in malicious emails during the crisis. Nakamitsu said the UN has received worrying reports of attacks against healthcare organizations and medical research facilities worldwide. She said growing digital dependency has increased the vulnerability to cyber attacks, and one such attack takes place every 39 seconds. The chief said nearly 90 countries are still only at the early stages of making commitments to cybersecurity, but she said the UN has made global progress to address the threats and will create a secure and functioning cyberspace. In India, millions of migrant workers continue to face hunger, hardships and road accidents in their journey back home. Prime Minister Narendra Modi imposed a sudden lockdown in March, causing mayhem for labourers. In recent incidents, hundreds of workers crossed Yamuna River on foot from Haryana to go home in Bihar. Talking to media, the migrants said they have been crossing the river at night to avoid the daytime heat. The workers said they do not have money and police thrashed them on the road, which is why they are crossing the river at night. Meanwhile, 35 migrants were injured after the bus they were travelling in overturned in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. British authorities have charged 4 men and a woman with the murder of Aya Hachim, a Muslim woman shot dead in Blackburn last week. 19-year-old Lebanese British Muslim was shot dead in a drive-by shooting as she was out for grocery shopping. In a statement, police said 2 of the suspects, Firoz Suleiman and Abu Bakr Satya, will appear in court today. It said the pair will also be charged with attempting to murder a man who was not the intended target in the incident. The force later said Usman Satya, Judy Chapman and Kashif Manzoor have also been charged with murder and attempted murder. Lancashire police said 2 shots were fired in the incident. At first hit a bullet and the second killed Aya. Malta has rescued a group of 140 migrants from a sinking dinghy but refused to bring them to land. Authorities are holding the migrants on a chartered tourist boat just outside the country's territorial waters. The rescue was conducted by a Maltese patrol boat after the dinghy drifted into search and rescue region. The rescued group joined the tourist boats, which already hold 160 migrants rescued 2 weeks ago. The government says it will not allow any migrants in Malta, as other EU nations have not kept promises to take refugees already brought to the island. But it said a group of 19 people, including children and pregnant women, was brought to Malta for humanitarian reasons. Now, the WHO says 80 million children worldwide are at risk of measles due to the disruption of routine immunization during the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, it said the immunization services is hindered in 68 countries. It said disruption threatens to unwind decades of progress against vaccine-preventable diseases like measles. Meanwhile, UNICEF said they cannot let the fight against one disease come at the expense of progress in their fight against other diseases. It said these immunization must restart as soon as possible, or there is a risk exchanging one deadly outbreak for another. Wikipedia is instituting a new code of conduct to battle what the firm called toxic behavior by some volunteers. The Wikimedia Foundation, the organization that runs the site, voted on new measures that will be finalized by the end of the year. In a statement, Wikimedia's Board of Trustees said maintaining civility was a core value of the organization. Chief Executive Catherine Maher said Wikimedia must work together to create a safe, inclusive culture where everyone feels welcomed. The Foundation's binding code of conduct for members will include banning or limiting access if volunteers violate the terms. In Taiwan, tree climbing is getting popular. At a campground, a team of women use ropes to shimmy up a towering 7-story tall chena-berry trees. More about women bravery in this report.
Tree climbing remains somewhat niche in Taiwan. Now more and more women are embracing the challenge. The credit goes to the island's first international certified female climber and arborist, Sylvia Su. She says popularity of such gatherings in Europe inspired her.
My goal in organizing this camp is to encourage more and more women to get into tree climbing. We don't have restrictions in terms of climbing experience. We can teach you how to climb.
Many of the course attendees are beginners and are afraid of climbing up a 30-meter tall tree. But they feel a women-only camp is a more relaxed environment. Recalling her first climbing experience, a female climber says trees protect her even when wind is blowing.
I threw up the first time I climbed to 10 meters. I was actually very afraid of heights, but I feel very safe whenever I'm up a tree because I feel a tree is like a living being.
A university student plans to become a professional tree surgeon after completing her graduation.
Every time I'm with a tree, I feel like I'm with a friend and companion. I want to help trim its twigs and branches so that it can happily grow again.
Chang Han Chin, a high school teacher at the camp, calls climbing a magical feeling. Out of the 29 certified arborists in Taiwan, only 3 are women.
Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.